We are now on Daf Kuf Yud Ches Amud Beis. And once we mentioned the machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon in the previous Mishnah, and Rabbi Akiva's claim was Ein zu derech motzi midei avero, we have to find a way to be machmer and cover all possible averos. The Mishnah continues, Kidesh achas michamesh nosh. A man married one of 5 ladies. V'en yedua ezo kidesh. Kol achas omeres osi kidesh. No saying get l'chol achas v'achas is Rabbi Tarfon. You cannot permit any of the 5 to get married without having a get for each one of them. Umeniach ksuba. What do we do with the ksuba? Who is the real marriage partner? Meniach ksuba beineim mistalik. You know what? He owes 1 ksuba. What, are you going to make him pay a ksuba for each one of the 5 ladies? Let them prove that they got the condition. In the absence of such proof. Now, what happens after Meniach b'neim? We used to play a game as children called Snatch the Bag. Who's going to snatch the ksuba? Mistalik. So the Gemara Bab Metzia on Daf Lamed Zayin means Sheyashir Sabam Biyodo Achis Bar Miyabal. The money is left in escrow in his hands until we can clarify who is the rightful owner of that money, of the ksuba. Rabbi Akiva Omer ein zo derech motzia midei avera ad she'yiten getu ksuba l'chol achas v'achas. He is stealing the ksuba. He owes the ksuba to one of these 5 ladies. We don't know which one. Let him absolutely clarify that he's not in violation of theft by holding on to someone's ksuba. Let him pay the ksuba to each one of the 5 ladies. And that's an expression of Rabbi Akiva's principle of Ein zu derech motzi midei avera. Another example of this same machlokas is Gazal echem michamish v'eni. He's a Gazal. He doesn't know who he stole from. Kol echem echad omer osi Gazal. For sure, each one is going to say, you stole it from me. Meniach zel b'nei mistalik divrei Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Akiva Omer ein zo derech motzi midei avera ad shishalim l'kol echad v'yach. So the Gemara is medayik. Kidesh ktani ba lo ktani. When the Mishnah in the Reisha records the machlok between Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva, it specifically mentions Kidesh. And the assumption of the Gemara is that Kidesh, one of the 5, is Kidesh lafuke Baal. He could have been Makadisha with Be'ilah. So it means that the Tanav Mishnah holds that in the case of Baal achas michamesh noshim, Rabbi Tarfon would agree and concede that he's not potter from his chiyuv until he pays each one of them. Why? Because asaba maisa, he did an action of Kiddushay Bia. And the Rabbanan are going to consider him in this case and penalize him to pay up the chov ksuba to each one of the 5 and get himself out of a safek gezel. And in the Sefer of the Mishnah, where he stole from one of 5, again, we're going to have to be medayik. Gazal ketani. Lokach lo ketani. In the case of a gezel, where he stole from one of 5 people, he deserves a knas. But the Mishnah doesn't tell us about a case where he purchased an object of value from one of 5 people. He doesn't remember from who he bought and who he has to pay. Now, here we're going to get into Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is going to argue against Rabbi Tarfon and force him to pay up to each one of these 5 in a case of Gezel. But in a case of Mekach, where he didn't violate any Isur, Rabbi Akiva will concede to Rabbi Tarfon that Meniach es Tmei HaMekach Beineim u'Mistalek. So Gemara asks the following kasha: Mani Masnisen? Who's the Tana, the author of our Mishnah? Lo Tanakama, v'lo Reb Shimon Elazar. There's going to be a machlokes between Tanakama and Reb Shimon Elazar. We'll see it soon about how to interpret the machlokes between Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva. The Tanya. Rabbi Shimon Elazar Omer lo nechleku Rabbi Tarfon Rabbi Akiva al shekidish achas michamish noshim. Many days the kidish v'yaksuba v'nel miskama. Even Rabbi Akiva would be modeh that since he didn't violate any avera, we're not going to impose any sort of penalty on him. Because Mikra din is meniach b'neim mistalet. Alman nechleku al shebal. If he was Makadish, one of the 5 women with Kiddushay Bia, and he doesn't know which one, he's Rabbi Tarfon Omer meniach suva b'neim mistalet. Rabbi Akiva Omer ad shishalem kol achas v'yachas. He violated avera. Make sure he pays up each one. So we're studying now Reb Shimon Elazar. And he says that Rabbi Akiva only imposes a knas and forces him to pay up the ksuba times 5 in a case of Baal. Because Rabbi Akiva is going to say in the case of Baal that he violated an avera. And in the Sefer, in the case of Gezel, lo nechleku Rabbi Tarfon Rabbi Akiva shalokach mekach michamisha bnei adam, the ena yodea meize man lokach, sheminiach tbei mekach beineim u'mistalek. There's no machlokas. Even Rabbi Akiva agrees that he doesn't deserve a knas, he didn't violate an avera, and miniach tbei beineim mistalek. Lo nechleku el shegazal. This is parallel to the Reish of Baal. Shom Rabbi Tarfon Yiksel b'nei mistalek. Rabbi Akiva Omer, no, he violated an avera, he stole, let him get out of the suffix, and he can only do that at shishalim gzei l'kol echad v'echad. So this is the explanation of Rabbi Akiva according to Reb Shimon Elazar. So Gemara's midday. Me the Kama Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar shekidesh b'kidesh v'lokach lo pligi. That if there was no avera done, even Rabbi Akiva agrees that he's not chayav to each one of the 5. Michlal. Again, the Tanakama's opinion against Rabbi Shimon Elazar does not appear, but we're going to derive it by a diuk. The Tanakama savar the pligi. that even in the cases of Kiddush and Mekach and Lokach, where there was no Avera, there's a machlokas. And here's where Rabbi Tarfon says, Meiniach beineim v'mitztal, because there was no Avera. And Rabbi Akiva is going to say no. He's got to get out of the suffering. Is money, to whom can we attribute the authorship of our Mishnah? Tanakama. If you're going to go like the Tanakama, that the machlokus is in a case of Lokach, is Lisnei Kidesh for Lokach. The Mishnah, when it recorded the machlokus between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon, should have spoken about a case of Kidesh for Lokach. Not Kidesh for Gazal. But on the other hand, Itanakama, they're only arguing in Lokach, let's say Kiddush for Lokach. Okay, that we did already. The Rabbi Shimon Elazar, Lisnei Baal v'Gazal. In the Sefer it says Gazal, but in the Reish it says Kiddush. And according to Rabbi Shimon Elazar, there's no machlokes in Kiddush. And even Rabbi Akiva would be modeh that Beineach Mistalik, he's only arguing the case of Baal because of the Avera. And yet it doesn't say Baal in the Mishnah. We're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Leolam, the Gemara answer is Reb Shimon Elazar. We're going to accept the sheet of Reb Shimon Elazar. That it's only the Rabbi Akiva's argument against Rabbi Tarfon is only because of Baal or Gazal, where he did it Avera. Umay, and what does it mean in the Mishnah when it says in the Reisha Kidesh b'biyah? And Rabbi Tarfon holds that even though he was Mekadosh b'biyah, nevertheless, Meiniach beineim mistal. He doesn't have to pay each one of them. The Gemara now clarifies this. Tana Kidesh. So why, in effect, did the Mishnah use the word Kidesh? Meaning Kidesh b'biyah. Lo diacha kocha the Rabbi Akiva dafagav d'isur d'rabbananav. The Torah says you could be mekadosh in each b'biyah. What's the terrible affair that he did? It's only a rabbinic affair. Sha'aslu l'kadesh b'biyah. I'm a little confused because that's Rav. I didn't know it goes back to the Tanoim. Oh, Rav was the one who gave Malchus to someone who violated that priestess and he was Mekadosh b'biyah. So even though on a Deraisa level he didn't do any Easter Konis, nevertheless for violating the Drabanan, he deserves a Knas. The Chaim Tana, and we have a Machlokas of Gazal, Lo Dicha Kocha Rabbi Tarfon. The Afagav di Sur Kavid, and he Sur Deraisa Kavid, Lo Konis. Rabbi Tarfon doesn't have a Knas. And now we get to the last Mishnah in the parak. So she was in a chazaka of Hetel Lashuk, or if you want to say it the other way, of Isa Liyava. Ubas v'yama meis b'ayli v'achach meis b'ni, which means that she's reestablishing the original chazaka. That she's muteres liyavam, but that she's asura liyavam umuteres l'shuk. Nemenes. But if, on the other hand, she testifies that meis b'ni, she wants to change the chazak akaf meis baili, And now she wants to be matter herself to the Yavam and aser herself to the Shuk. Ain't an emes. We're not going to believe her to be matter herself to the Yavam, because since her original chazaka when she went out to the Yam, to the Medina Sayyam, was that she has a son, she's becheskes asura liyavam. She's not believed to change that chazaka and undermine it. And therefore, I'm sorry. But despite that, the afal pichen chosheshin lidvareh, we're not going to allow yibum, but we're going to require chalitza. And this is based on the principle of Shavia Nafshi Chaticha Disura. Because by her own admission that her son died first, she falls for Yibum. We're not going to allow her to have Yibum because she's changing the Chazaka. But on the other hand, we're going to require Chalitza. Okay, now the Mishnah is going to go on to discuss a case where she had a chazaka that she's not zkuka liyivum. There's no zika because she has a son. That was the ratio of the Mishnah. I'm sorry. But now let's go on to a case where she didn't have a son when she went out to Medina Sayyam. So she was becheskas zikas yivum. So now the din is going to change, just the other way around. Nitan ben, she comes and she says, I had a son in Medina Sayyam. V'yomra, and she adds that meis b'ni v'akach meis baili. So she's reiterating and re-strengthening the original chazaka when she went out without a son, that she's mutaris liyibum, zikas yibum nemenes. But meis baili v'akach meis b'ni, if she claims that her son survived the death of her husband, and therefore she's allowed to get married to anyone without chalitza, Eino nemenes, she cannot pater herself up from chalitza, because when she went out to Medina Sayyam, she was becheskas zekuka liyavam. She didn't have a son. However, choshin lidvareha, becholetzes v'lo mesyabemes, we're going to be machmir, and she's asura liyavam, even though her original chazaka was that she's muteris liyavam. But we're not going to go that far. We're going to be choshesh that maybe she's telling the truth, and therefore choletzes v'lo mesyabemes, we're not going to allow yibum. And the Mishnah goes on to another case where the chazaka was that she had no brother-in-law, no yavam. Which would mean that when her husband dies, she's allowed to marry anyone. She's muteris l'shuk. Nitan liyavam. Now she comes back and tells the story that her mother-in-law had another son, and her husband now has a brother, and that's her brother-in-law and the yavam. Amra, now she tells us meis baili v'achkach meis yevami. Or alternatively, Yevami v'achkach meis baili. So therefore, I'm muteris l'shuk, because my brother-in-law, the potential Yovam, is not alive. Is nemenes, she's mater herself to the shuk. And this is based on another principle, which is called a pesha asar hu a pesha hiter. We didn't know about the brother-in-law. She's the one who put her foot in her mouth, so to speak, to reveal to us that there is a brother-in-law, and her mother-in-law gave birth to another son. And now she's saying he died. So that's called a pesha asar a pesha hiter. But holcha hiu baila v'yevama l'Medina Sayyam. She has a brother-in-law. There is a yavam. So she goes out to Medina Sayyam b'cheskas asur l'shuk. Amra meis baili v'achkach Yevami, or Yevami v'achkach meis baili, and now muteris l'shuk. My brother-in-law is gone. There's no yavam. Ain't in a minute, because she had a chazaka of zkuka liyibum, and we don't believe her to undermine that chazaka. Sheina isha neminis lomar meis Yevami shetinase l'shuk. Vilo, she's not believed. Mesa chosa shetikones lebeisa. Right, her husband has a brother just 1 second. Is this a case of Yibum? 1 second. Yeah. Her brother married her sister. And now she's claiming that her sister died, and therefore her brother-in-law is allowed to marry her. So the Mishnah says, Ein ha'isha de'menes lomar meis Yevami. Okay, that we explained before. V'lo ne'menes lomar meis achosa shetikones lebeisa, that she should be able to be married to her late sister's husband, who's mutter after the misa vachosa, but we're not going to believe her. Why? Because she has the chazaka of the Isser that existed before, and we'll only believe her when she says Meis Baili to be motzi her from the cheskes eshesish. Yena ish neman lomar Meis Achi sheyabem ishta. My brother died, and I'm going to marry my sister-in-law. And furthermore, v'lo mesa ishto she'isachosa. He's not believed to say that his wife died in order to allow him to marry his wife's sister. Boy, mine Rava mirav Nachman amazaki get li ishto. He gives a get to someone else. And that someone else is now going to be a shliach on behalf of the Isha. He has a brother, and he doesn't have any children, and he wants to pater her from Yibum by giving her a get. Mahu. What's the law in such a case? And the Gemara is not going to analyze the suffix. Gave under Sanyole. She hates the Yavam. She doesn't want to be Misyavim. Therefore, the Baal could appoint a shliach on behalf of his Isha because of Zakali Adam Shalbafanav. She doesn't want to fall for Yibum. Oh, Dilma perhaps gave it to Zimnin, Rachman Ole. Maybe sometimes she wants to marry the Yavam. There are cases of that sort. Is Chovula, then you're working against her best interest by receiving this get. He ain't Chavali Adam Shalbafanav. He can't appoint the shliach against the will of the Mishalachas, of the Isha. Amar Lei, Rav Nachman responds to Rava Tadina. We're going to derive the conclusion to the suffix from the Reish of our Mishnah. When a woman testifies to establish herself as the Kukali Yavam, that's the Reish. And in the Seifa, when she establishes herself that she's not Kukali Yavam, is Choshishim L'dvarev Choletzis V'lo Misyah Bemes. So we have a suffix in each one of these cases. If she really hates the Yevama, or maybe she loves the Yevama. So too in our case, we have the same suffix. Whether it's a chov, when he appoints a shliach to receive a get, or it's a schutz. Therefore, if the husband dies before she receives the get, which is always the case when there's a suffix. Perhaps the Gerish and Achal, and she doesn't fall for Yibum. And we have now an Isser Veishasah. Another suffix. He appoints a shliach to receive her get on her behalf when there's friction between them. Shall we say, this is a great merit And she's thrilled to have someone receive the get. O Dilma, Naicha de Gufa Odifle. Even if there's Ktata, she'd rather be married. That's called Naicha de Gufa. She has some sort of closeness to a man. Oshma, I have a logical derivation. Tiyomer Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish establishes a metaphysical principle called Tav L'Meisa Tav L'Meisa Armalo. A woman would rather be with two bodies, she and her husband, rather than sit as an almana, as a widow. And even if it's a makom ktata, I mean, the original premise of principle of Reish Lakish was formulated with regard to a mukashchin, and how much more so in the case of ktata, she would prefer staying married rather than getting a get. And this is all based on the curse that was given to Chava, Eli Sheikh Chukase. Abai Omar. Another way of saying exactly what Reish Lakish said, but in a different metaphor, Dishum Shemana Gavra. Kursia Becharasa Romula. Even if her husband, I laugh, he's as small as an ant. I guess he's a real midget. Nevertheless, she can show off her chashivus that she's married to him. And Kursaya Becharasa, her fancy chair, she can put it amongst the other women. She's up there with the chashuvos because she's married to this guy, no matter how short he might be. Rav Papa Amar, he had a different way of expressing and conveying the same message. The Nafza Gavra, they used to have a person who was in charge of nipus. That means when they cut off the wool from the back of the sheep, he would have to comb the wool in order to remove those little stickers, those black things that stick. It's a very low kind of umnus. It's what you call it, umnus me'usa. Tikre b'sife bava v'tesa. She's not embarrassed to sit out on the entranceway to her house in front of everybody publicly because she still is happy that she's married, even to a guy who's working in the lowest industry. Rabbi Ashi Omar had another way of phrasing it, the kulsa gavra. Even if her husband comes from a mishpacha that has a shemetz psul in it, people are speaking about some admixture of who knows what, that married into the ancestors of this husband, lo bai tilfche lekidra. She's not going to ask him, even for a simple food like adashim, which are very cheap. She's just happy to be married to him. And the Gemara adds, Tana, we learned in a Brisa, but Kulam, all these cases enumerated above of women who are married to Bailim Shvalim, and she shows Chiba. It's Mizanos, Tolos, Bibaleh. The Brisa says that these are cases of women who unfortunately committed an immoral act with another man. They became pregnant and they want to cover up. They want to show that they got pregnant from their husbands. So that's why they're satisfied with such marriages, because it gives her a fig leaf of protection for a cover-up to claim that she got pregnant from her husband. Hadron alecha ha'isha shalom. And then we get to a parak that's called Ha'isha Basra, which is the 16th parak and the last parak of Yevamot. So I think we could say at this point, we are 15 over 16 towards our goal of making a siyum on Masechet Yevamot. Okay, let me wish you a great day.